Hello, everyone. We're live. Currently, 0 people watching. Okay. So in this video, I thought it would be fun to steel man theism. So to present my best case for theism. I'm obviously an atheist, but I think that it's worth steel manning views. So if I were doing a debate and I were arguing for theism, here's what my opening statement would be. There are lots of good reasons to expect that God would exist. I don't think we can deduce God a priori, but rather, like Swinburne, argue that he's more consistent with numerous facts about the world. First is cosmology. First, we know that there must have been some ultimate cause. Positing a single ultimate cause is simpler than positing multiple causes. You might think that there can be an infinite regress of past events, but that would be metaphysically impossible, resulting in paradoxes. A, an infinite regress of past events would make it impossible to ever get to the present by successive addition. B, it would make the number of days equal to the number of days, both infinite. However, this is impossible. A thing can't be the same size as a small subset of that thing. The notion that the total number of days that have existed in the past would be equal to the total number of past Thursdays is absurd. See, this runs into paradoxes like the Grim Reaper paradox. If one Reaper will kill you at 1 o'clock, one at 12:30, one at 12:15, etc., unless the one before it then kills you, then none of them could kill you because a prior one would have had to. However, if none of them would kill you, you would have to be alive. But this is impossible because if you were alive by the time that any of the individual Reapers got to you, then those individual Reapers would have to kill you. And so making it so that we can have infinite distinct temporal segments results in metaphysical absurdity and actually results in a contradiction. Now, so from this we learned that there was some ultimate cause, but there are a few ways that we can deduce this cause to be God. A, it cannot be limited because limits require an explanation. We're rational in believing there was no limit on how fast things could go until we discovered the speed of light. However, there could be no external explanation limiting it because an unlimited being would have to, because the first being can't have any external explanation because it is the foundation for everything else that is. An unlimited being would have to be all-powerful and all-knowing because absence of power and knowledge would be limits. This would entail omnibenevolence because perfect wisdom would result in omnibenevolence if we accept moral rationalism. B, it can't have begun to exist or be material because it's the basis for time, space, and matter. So it has to be timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and very powerful to bring into the existence of the universe. The only immaterial thing that can have causal powers is a mind, so it has to be an immaterial mind. C, it must be necessary because otherwise it would need some further explanation for its existence. However, it can't have any further explanation because it's the ultimate metaphysical foundation. God already is posited to be necessary because necessity is a perfection, and God is being conceived of as a necessary foundation, which means that this is evidence for God. However, physical things can't be necessary, so it must be something immaterial. So these are 3 different ways that we can realize that the first cause has to be God. Second, God is the best explanation for the fine-tuning of the universe. If any of the cosmological constants were tweaked even slightly, life could not have arisen. Thus, the probability of life on atheism is very low, while it's very high on theism. As Barnes argues, if we made slight tweaks to the cosmological constant, the universe would have collapsed after 1 second. The Higgs VeV, then hydrogen would be unable to electron capture, resulting in the entire periodic table disappearing. Up quark, down quark, and electron-Euclid couplings have to be exactly the way they are, or life couldn't exist. Baryon and dark matter to photon ratios, if they were changed at all, and scalar fluctuation amplitude, if they were changed at all, life couldn't exist, and many, many others. Thus, the fact that the laws of physics are so precisely designed such that any tiny tweaks would erase all life means that the existence of life is very improbable on atheism, but very likely on theism. And any explanation of how you get these finely tuned laws is going to be much more complicated than just a God who finely tunes the laws. Third, theism is the best explanation for souls. Souls are real, as the agnostic philosopher Michael Hummel argues in his book Knowledge, Value, and Reality. A soul is the only way to explain 4 features of personal identity. 1, every moment of existence, you're just one being. You're never two. 2, identity is transitive. If I am the same person as my 2-year-old self, and I'm the same as my 60-year-old self, then my 2-year-old self is the same as my 60-year-old self. 3, identity is intrinsic. It doesn't depend on facts about other beings. And 4, identity is objective. There's a fact about whether I'm the same person as my 4-year-old self. in a way that there may not be for something like the ship of Theseus. However, these only make sense if there is a soul. God is the only way to account for souls. They're baked into theism, while very surprising on atheism. Suppose we add lots of paint to a painting. Is it the same painting? It seems like there isn't a fact of the matter. However, there is a fact of the matter about whether I'm the same person as my 3-year-old self was. This is hard to account for on atheism, because on atheism, if changing the properties of a painting makes it a semantic question, whether it's the same painting, why wouldn't changing the properties of a person, as happens when they get older, make it a semantic question whether they're the same person? The philosopher Derek Parfit has argued that it's hard to maintain an objective self on atheism, and he's an atheist. If you no longer have any overlapping cells with your 4-year-old self, why are you the same? Why do you stop being the same after you die? Theism has an answer. You share a soul with your younger self, and yet atheism does not have an answer. 4 is morality. Now, while I don't think the traditional moral arguments for God succeeds, I won't raise it, but I think that there are 2 ways in which morality does favor God. 1, while atheism may account for how certain possible things could be good, it doesn't explain why the good things would happen to exist. Why would objectively bad pain need to arise? Evolution just needs things to be subjectively not enjoyed. It doesn't need objective badness. So on atheism, it's hard to explain why entities to whom morality applies to arise in the first place. If there's no objective badness, then it's not objectively bad to torture infants for fun. Second, atheism has trouble accounting for moral knowledge. It doesn't serve a survival advantage, so it's hard to account for why we have moral knowledge. If the atheist denies that we have moral knowledge, then how can he know that it's wrong to torture infants for fun? And yet the notion that you should not torture infants for fun is much more intuitive than any of the arguments for atheism. 5 is consciousness. It's once again much more strongly predicted on theism than on atheism. On theism, God would make conscious agents in his image, but atheism has a notoriously difficult time accounting for the hard problem of consciousness. Consciousness on naturalism has to be causally impotent, because on naturalism everything moves according to the mechanisms of the laws of physics. But we know that consciousness is not causally impotent. If it were, then it would be a huge coincidence that the laws of nature naturalistically make our hand move away whenever we have a conscious desire to move our hand away. So atheism can't account for consciousness because it's not physical and interacts with physics in a way that's ruled out by naturalism. Theism, however, can account for consciousness. 6 is the evolutionary argument against naturalism. This argument says that premise 1, we have reliable faculties for forming beliefs. This premise is impossible to deny. If a person denies this, then their denial of this premise is unlikely to be correct, because they're agreeing that they don't have any good way of arriving at the truth. Premise 2, reliable faculties for forming beliefs are much more probable on theism than on naturalism. God would want us to form reliable beliefs, but on naturalism, there's very little reason for us to be able to form reliable beliefs. Reliability only matters if it increases our survival. General reliable mechanisms would be unlikely, and so the conclusion follows that reliable faculties for forming beliefs are evidence for theism over naturalism. So that's my steel man of the case for theism. There are obviously other arguments for theism that can be raised. Some I think are okay, some I don't. But I think that I don't know. The first argument I don't find very persuasive, but the others I think all increase my credence in theism by at least a little bit. All right, yeah. Thanks for watching, everyone. Yeah, peace.